So there's rumors recently that HEAVYGOD might be going to G2, and it's something I actually suggested in a video a few months ago that would actually make G2 an insane team, and I really thought that would be a good idea if he replaced the right player, and that player obviously wasn't Nico. I was thinking HEAVYGOD could replace Hunter, because then you could have HEAVYGOD playing most of the site anchor roles, which is I assume what he's going to do on G2 now. You could shift Malbs into some slightly better positions, and on T side, HEAVYGOD's role does feel like it's, I don't know if it exactly aligns with Hunter, but he plays a little more on the passive side a lot of the time, and that's something that Hunter, I feel like, plays a little on the way too passive side a lot of the time. So it felt like it would be the perfect replacement. However, replacing Nico, maybe not the perfect replacement. Now, it does open Malbs up at least a little bit, but there's going to be a bit of a gap in terms of how they're going to do the entry duo, because for a little while near the end there, it was mostly Malbs and Nico going together a lot of the time. And when you look at that, that was highly effective. In fact, even on some maps, I don't want to say it happened a lot, but I definitely saw some games on some maps where Nico would be the one leading in a lot more often than Malbs, and while Malbs might be going in second a decent amount of the time. Now, there's lots of options as to how you can solve that. I think we may have gone a little too far with the idea that roles define everything, right? I mean, what makes a good player is the ability to move between different roles, to have a little bit of flexibility, right? However, it does seem like a pretty good litmus test for like how quickly someone's going to slot into a roster and how much the coach and the IGL really need to work to make things happen, how much their roles actually overlap, right? And I think for CD side, I think HEAVYGOD's going to work perfectly. For T side, I'm really not sure how their T sides are going to look, because I mean, HEAVYGOD isn't incapable of going aggressive, and maybe that's something he prefers doing. But you can see what he's doing in this round. I mean, he's really great at finding those timings for the trade frags, like Blame F-esque, you know, just really solid at finding the timing to make sure that he gets a kill anytime that his teammate dies ahead of him. I think he's really effective at that. But if you actually watch G2 play, it feels like that's what Hunter does a lot of the time, right? Hunter seems to be that third guy in, that guy that, you know, plays off of the entry pack, tries to find, you know, tries to find the after plants and things like that. And honestly, I think HEAVYGOD is a lot better at that. But it's possible maybe Hunter would rather be in the entry pack. It definitely doesn't feel like it, but I suppose it's possible. And then the other question when it comes to G2 is like, it looks like m0NESY wanted to leave. He seems like, I don't know, what I get from him is that he's independently motivated, but some players do obviously lose motivation if they're in a situation where they wanted to leave the team and they basically weren't allowed to leave the team. Are they really putting in 120% afterwards? I mean, the players at m0NESY's level you would expect would. Regardless, looking at HEAVYGOD, I wanted to take a look at some of his gameplay because damn is his gameplay nice to look at. I mean, the dude just doesn't really make very many mistakes, really, honestly. Like, he's just constantly in the right position. He's not hyper aggressive. He kind of reminds me of like how I used to think of like Crims in like 2015, where he really just didn't, he really just did all of the things right. You know, you look at like HEAVYGOD play, and I feel like it feels like the game is so easy, you know? Except for when apparently you get flanked by Rain on an A site after, that doesn't look very easy, dealing with someone flanking you from Palace and just killing you under balcony like that, but whatever. Okay, Inters wins the round, 3-1 down, and I mean, I chose this game specifically because this is a game where I feel like you kind of see the problems HEAVYGOD has, which is that he's kind of insanely good, and yet statistically, if you look at his 2024, his matchups against top 5, top 10 teams actually aren't that good statistically. But if you actually look at this, he's gonna go 18-16 in this game, but his team loses 13-6, and it's like a lot of these rounds it feels like there's not that much more he could do. That round, I really hate the flash they threw from top mid, but at the same time, he definitely should be getting that kill the vast majority of the time, whether Kerrigan dodges that flash or not. HEAVYGOD fighting Kerrigan at long range like that, he's got an AK, he should be winning that duel most of the time. He just doesn't win it that time, so maybe he could have improved on that one. But for the majority of this game, I feel like he does everything he can, but a lot of the time it feels like you give a lot of credit to entry fraggers that do well. And the thing about entry fraggers is it kind of makes the job of everyone behind them so much easier, right? Because what happens to HEAVYGOD, it feels like a decent amount of the time, is both of the players ahead of him end up dying. And then once they both end up dying, he actually, your job as the third guy in, you're basically screwed, right? Like, you know, very little you can actually do because, I mean, just look at the situation here. They're 3v4. It's not even that bad of a situation. HEAVYGOD jiggled apartments. That's, I was questioning if that was more of a passive play or not that Jiggly did on Kerrigan. I was like, well, maybe, you know, 3v4, maybe some people just kind of swing that. But at the same time, you're kind of, when you're jiggling that, I think you're more expecting an Opper to be there. So I think the jiggle makes a lot of sense. 3v4, one of his teammates has a deagle. They kind of know he's here. It's obvious they were going for a B split based on the play they were going for earlier. He's just not in a spot to get anything done. Still finds himself a kill, right? He comes out apartments, doesn't get a second kill. But you can see, like, in a lot of these rounds, you can definitely tell how hard the job is when the players ahead of you don't get anything done, right? And so even though his stats against top 5, top 10 teams don't look very good, I feel like when I look at the games of HEAVYGOD against top 5, top 10 teams, I don't see him doing things like losing many gunfights that he... You know, I don't feel like he's getting outplayed. I feel like his team oftentimes is getting outplayed, and he's not playing a role where he can necessarily easily react to that, you know, where he can easily come out of that. Even though, theoretically, right, like, second, third in, those are kind of like the roles you want, you know, if you could pick a role, because you're not going to instantly die. But the problem is just the reality of it, that there's... You know, if both players ahead of you die and you're not like third in on like an actual full exec, right, where you're, you know, your opponents are flashed, maybe they're getting mollied out of position, that type of thing, then you actually kind of end up somewhat trapped because you can't go the other direction, but at the same time, you don't have much chance to actually get any kills if you go the current direction you're currently going, you know? And so they're already down 6-1. HEAVYGOD is what? He's 4-7. Has he done that much wrong? I mean, he definitely should have won that fight against Kerrigan. I think, you know, no offense to Kerrigan, but HEAVYGOD, you know, if he wants to be a top player, I think he wins that the majority of the time. And this is the other round that I think that's, I would call that an error. Not that, like, look, is that flash easy to dodge? No. But at the same time, it is easy to like get blind and then instantly duck into the cubby here. I guess if you were like trying to like be really generous, you could say his goal there was specifically like make sure he dies so his teammate trades, but I don't think that's the idea. I think he just needs to duck into the cubby there, and if he ducks into the cubby, he probably survives, his teammate probably gets the kill, and maybe he gets one after, like, or if his teammate dies, I mean, he could maybe even get the trade. Those are the two rounds where I think everyone loses a gun duel once in a while, right? Like Kerrigan, it's not like Kerrigan whiffed hard on HEAVYGOD top mid. It's just that HEAVYGOD had a little bit of time to win that duel. Kerrigan didn't hit an insane shot. You would hope that HEAVYGOD would win that. And then the second one, that's a nice flash from Rops. Didn't really give HEAVYGOD any chance. Just maybe he had an opportunity to survive. But now again, look at another round, 3v4. He does actually find the timing this time around to get himself a kill. So one of the things that obviously happens, you know, even if you're going in and both of the players ahead of you died, if they got one, then the map opens up a lot and you can get a lot more opportunity to catch people on timings, right? Where he's not expecting you, or he has to worry about two angles at the same time because the map is so open, because there's so many angles you could be getting killed from. So that's kind of the goal. Like the reason being second, third in is like, it's something you want, is because of situations like that, right? So a slightly missed flash, slightly. Based on the buy from FaZe, it looks like they know this type of underpass play is very likely. Either they saw it, or I don't think Boomich would have gone out top mid alone. I think it's fairly likely that they just know that on this type of buy, FaZe loves to go underpass, and that's exactly what happened. Now, HEAVYGOD actually never really sees it, and then Inters ends up dying, so then you're in a 4v4, but they have the exec out B, which is all you really need. The molly towards bench is actually really nice to actually open up, because one of the main ways you lose a B take is someone's hiding bench, he gets a kill, and then someone market, like, peeks out and, like, catches someone swinging bench, that type of thing. So I kind of just shut that down entirely. And HEAVYGOD never even really sees anybody this whole round. I don't know. Every time I look at HEAVYGOD on T-side, I really do. It really does remind me kind of like Hunter. It's not like I feel like, again, HEAVYGOD does anything wrong, that there's any... Well, I mean, mistakes happen, but it's not like he's like playing badly. It's just the overlap, just stylistically. Like I always thought this about like Frozen and Rops, where Frozen and Rops both feel to me to be players that they like to take. They're kind of meticulous, is what I feel like, in the way they like to do things. They like to kind of clear out angles. They like to make sure that they're, for the most part, I mean, look, most good players play like this, right? But they do it fairly aggressively. aggressively passive. Is the way I'm saying that. They focus very heavily, and that's why you saw near the end of Mao's, his stint on Mao's, Rops was often called a baiter. Sometimes I think for honestly pretty good reason, is because they would focus so heavily on only taking engagements when they had an advantage. So like they'd be in something like a 3v4 where, you know, they could take a risk and maybe give their team a chance to win the round, but decide to like, well, you know, I'm going to take a disadvantageous engagement. I don't really want to take that, right? And when you see those two players on the same team, I tried to look at like what is the problem? Like why did Frozen replacing Twist not work, right? And I looked at like so many different options for why it could be positions, like role changes, all these different things. And nothing really seemed to make all that much sense, except for coming back to the idea that like they both play stylistically a little similar, which means there's they're both often trying to do a little bit too much of the same things. And that's what I feel like could happen with HEAVYGOD and Hunter on T sides, where they're both kind of stylistically a little more on the passive side and looking to trade off of teammates. And do you have the first, second in? I suppose Mobs is the question. Actually, the other question I'm interested in is like, is Mobs going to remain kind of mostly the first in player, or is he actually going to be adjusted to more of the star roles on T side, going second in, and you're gonna move either Snacks or Hunter or HEAVYGOD onto that first in role, right? That's actually one of the other interesting ideas. Obviously, like positionally, the exact positions that HEAVYGOD's playing, I'm not sure if they overlap with Hunter or not. It's just I'm thinking more stylistically of the way, you know, the way they go into bomb sites, things like that, more so than anything else. Although to be fair, I mean, it looks like HEAVYGOD. I feel like with what I've seen from HEAVYGOD, it does feel like he would be able to adjust relatively easy to the majority of situations. All right, so pistol round, I mean, this is pretty much just an aim battle. His team loses B. This is a nice little flash. Okay, what? I thought it was gonna land behind and they'd swing out in front of it to like clear right, but oh yeah, that is a sloped wall, so they must know that. Okay, yeah, I've never tried to throw a flash off of that. Okay, that is a sloped wall. He probably knew that and like knew it was gonna land like that, but whatever. HEAVYGOD does end up playing, I believe he's their A anchor. I do like the idea of playing 2A on anti-ecos. You just prevent the opportunity for your opponents to catch you off guard by like double peeking ramp and palace, which is a good way for them to catch you off guard. And you make it a little harder for them to control the rifle if, you know, if HEAVYGOD does end up dying by someone lurking out palace, Boomich can trade, or at least secure, like, hopefully hold on to the bomb site long enough for someone to rotate in so your opponents don't pick up that M4. Because when you're looking at, like, anti-ecos, well, you could play an MP9 close, but that guy can get kind of caught off guard by a P250, Tech 9, or obviously a Deagle. And if you play an M4 at range, sometimes even if the M4 dies at range, right, like, even if he dies at ticket, sometimes it can be retrieved, and sometimes you end up in this situation where he dies and then, you know, it can be a little hard to actually retrieve the gun if you want to go for a retake or something like that. But okay, anti-eco 4K, that's not really holding up the idea. The idea that he has I don't know what idea is not holding up, but usually, you know, I prefer my players that I'm supporting to get kills on gun rounds. I feel like those are slightly more impactful. Although, again, yeah, I mean, you can never really look down on kills on anti-eco, right? Plenty of teams lose plenty of games in the history of CS. Thousands of games have been lost to hundreds of thousands of games, if we include matchmaking, have been lost to not losing anti-ecos, but just losing too many players on anti-ecos. Like, and so you don't have money, you end up saving a round earlier than you should have, and because of that save, you end up losing the game. Hundreds of thousands of games. That stat, I pulled it right out of my ass, but it makes sense. Makes sense to me. All right, last round, I mean, maybe he could have got a kill on the guy Cat, but he obviously tried to transfer and get both. Didn't work out. Can't really blame him for that. They were already losing the round anyways. And now they're going for the heavy contestant middle. HEAVYGOD It feels like he's just laying down some fucking covering fire, army style. Oh my god! Oh my god! That is the opposite. That is the opposite of covering fire. That is nasty. That is public bus station piss floor nasty. Oh my god. 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 This guy is the savior. He's the savior of G2. I'm willing to say it after that one clip. That one 2K. Just in a random game. Just 2 kills. What are you doing, Brokey? Oh my god. I'm here for HEAVYGOD, but at the same time, Brokey, why weren't you turned around, man? Damn. Alright, 11-6. I mean, look, I feel like HEAVYGOD is... Has he played perfect? No. Has he played more perfect than probably anyone else on his team? Yes. In a 13-6 loss, right? Like, I feel like what is the real definition of set up for success, you know? Like, he's not being thrown in first, like, being sent, you know, sacrificed, right? Like, he's not being completely killed by his team, but at the same time, he's doing a lot of supporting, he's throwing a lot of the utility for his team, he's setting up his teammates, and he's kind of going in after the bomb site hit has kind of like, you know, either it's going well by now or it's not going to work at all, you know what I mean? You saw that a lot on the B hits where like the first 2 players die and he's just kind of fucked. So like, is he set up for success? I would say generally no, but the definition of what set up for success means, I think, is very unclear, right? Because at the point that it is now, it's like, who's set up for success? I feel like the only correct answer is like oppers, and like if you do like a full site exec where you throw flashes specifically to get your first player to go in, and I guess second player in. Okay, so maybe it is defined relatively effectively. Okay, maybe I'm just trolling. Icy's another player, by the way, that I'm pretty interested in, because obviously he's replacing Jame on Virtus Pro, which is confirmed, right? And from what I've seen of Icy, I've been fairly impressed with Icy. Not as much, I feel like, as I have been with HEAVYGOD. People have been asking me to do a review of Icy, and I've looked at a couple of games of his, and it just didn't seem... I don't know. People don't want to... People don't want to hear about Virtus Pro. It's not their favorite team of all time. But you know who should be your favorite team of all time? FaZe. No, any team with HEAVYGOD. No, G2.